Hey everyone, welcome to a quick tutorial on how to composite images in Photoshop. So this is a quick example of what we're going to be doing within Photoshop. Basically taking two different photos, putting them together, trying to match them so it looks like it's one photo, but it also doesn't have to necessarily match. You can just composite images that might look cool together, and I'll kind of show you how to do that. So let's dive straight into this, but first I just wanted to thank one of my students on the Photography Master course on Udemy who asked about this topic because I think it's a good topic to teach, and it's really actually a lot of work to learn exactly how to do it properly. And as you can tell here, this isn't a perfect image, but it's a cool thing to play around with, and practice makes perfect. So if you're in Photoshop, or whether you're in Photoshop or not, take your photo that you want to composite and we will open them in Photoshop. But first, let's just see the two photos that I am using. This Llano Beach that I found on Wikipedia, and then this photo of my wife and I during a engagement shoot that we did for the wedding photography class that I have on videoschoolonline.com. So first, let's just open up the background. So the background layer is going to be this beach. So I'm just going to say open up in Photoshop. So now we have our photo in Photoshop. It's the background layer, and then we can bring in our next photo just by dragging it onto our composition. So now we have our two layers over here in the layer panel, you can see. Now, one way to composite images is just through blend modes, and you will see the blend modes up here above the layer panel next to opacity. So you can scroll through these different options by clicking and selecting one, or you can select your layer, make sure that it's placed on your composition, so pressing the return key, and then holding shift down, you can hit the plus or minus keys on your keyboard. So you can see that I'm scrolling through, and these are kind of cool options if you want to do something funky with the background and the foreground. You can choose one, you can go into it and then change the opacity of each layer, and this will kind of affect how it looks. You can go in and change the, say, curves, the brightness or contrast, and this will also affect how it looks. So doing that can be a cool way to composite images. But another way is maybe something more like this, where you want to get it more realistic, where you cut out one image and put it in the background. So to do that, I'm going to select my top layer. I'm going to go over to my quick select tool, make sure that I have the plus sign up here. I think the size 30, spacing 25 is great. It will depend on the size of photo that you are using, and then just drag and select the area that you want to cut out. And you don't have to be perfect, because we're going to go back and fix the things that we messed up on, because sometimes Photoshop thinks we want something when we don't. So to do that, just go click this minus tool. So you see here it grabbed this tree in the background, go in, and let's see what else. We got this little hole down here, so let's go in and subtract that. We can decrease the size of our brush by hitting the brackets on our keyboard, something like that. And you can see it's not perfect, but you can go in and actually make it completely perfect if you want. Or another thing that we can do is click this refine edge, but before we do that, make sure you have auto enhance selected. That will help it make better selections. But select that auto enhance, and this module will pop up. And you'll see that it picked up some of these lines over here, and that will be gotten rid of by clicking the smart radius, increasing the size of the smart radius, smoothing it out a bit, and then feathering a bit. We can even add some contrast, and just do this until the edge looks a little bit good. But you'll see here that I missed this spot down here, so let me just go back. And before we do the refine edge, do that. I'm just going to get rid of any area in the middle right here. And then let's do the refine edge. Smart radius, go up a little bit. You don't want to go too much because it can get a little wonky. And then I basically do a little bit of smoothing, a little bit of feathering, a little bit of contrast, which seems to help select more defined edges. And then you could expand it or not with this shift edge, but I'm not going to do that for now. I'm just going to hit OK. And now it will compute that. It will select what you have selected, and then you hit copy, so Command C on a Mac or Control C on a PC, and then paste, Command V. And that creates this new layer. If I turn off this bottom layer, you'll see that this new layer is here. Great. So this is looking pretty good already, but we have some edits to do to make it look even better. So this one, you can see the first thing that I did is resize it just to make it look a little bit more natural. It's kind of hard to tell because I don't have the photo with our legs. That would have been better to actually put in this image, but I think that looks a little bit more better. Then we want to change the color. So I'm going to duplicate this layer by just dragging it into this new item window. I'm going to rename this hue. I'm going to change the hue so that it matches more of the background. The weather when we were shooting these engagement photos was cloudy. It was a hot summer day, but it was a little bit muggy. The sun was behind us, and you can tell here that the sun would probably be shining directly on our faces in this photo at the beach. So go up to Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation, and now there's 100 million trillion ways to do this in Photoshop, but this is just one of them. Basically, I duplicate each layer, and then I add a new effect to it, and then I can go back to the previous layer if I need to. So hue saturation, let's just play with this hue to see what it looks like. You can see if I drop it down to the negatives, it becomes a little bit more magenta. I want it to be maybe a little bit less magenta, making it a little bit yellowish green, and that looks pretty good. You can uncheck this preview to see what it looks like. You can see that it just blends a little bit better with the background. The next thing we're going to do is duplicate, so I'm just going to drag this into a new composition or new item. Turn off this bottom one and call this levels. Go up to Image, Adjustments, Levels. I'm just going to change the levels a little bit to try to match the background. So maybe make it a little bit more contrasty and then brighten it up just a little bit more. So something like that looks pretty good. Okay, so there's one more step. You can see it's a little bit different. I think I added a little bit of saturation to the hue. So let me just duplicate this one more time. Or actually, I'll just do that quickly to this layer. Adjustments, hue saturation, and then I will add a little bit of saturation so it matches the background just a little bit better. But there's one more thing that you'll notice. It's a very subtle thing, but this background is a little bit blurry in this image, where here the background is completely sharp, and that's not typically how a photo would look if you were focusing on the couple right here in the front. It depends on what camera you're using and everything, but I think it would look better if the background was a little bit blurry. So to do that, I'm just going to unlock this background layer. I'm going to duplicate it. And on this top layer, I'm going to go up to Filter. I'm going to go to Blur and then Gaussian Blur, and then add something like this 10 pixels or so. Now that looks a little bit funky, and the reason is because the sand up here and the trees over here might still be a little bit more in focus than this background. Clouds way over here. So how are we going to make that look better? We're going to erase some of this blurry image so that part of it is in focus and part is blurry. An easy way to do that is to drag this into this little button down here, which will create a mask, and we can erase some of this layer mask by selecting this white box over here, going to our brush by just pressing B on our keyboard. We can change the size and hardness up here. I typically use a very large and not so hard brush, so very soft and feathered. And then make sure that your brush is on black to erase the image, so it's erasing some of this white. And just go down here towards the bottom. And when I did this, I started with just the bottom, so this looks a little bit better because the sand right here would be in focus with us. And then I'm just going to increase the size of my brush. I did that by holding Control Alt on my keyboard and dragging left or right. So that's another easy way to increase or decrease the size of the brush. And then I'm just going to erase the blur in these trees up here. So I'm assuming that the camera that we used was a little bit, the aperture was rather small actually, so that the depth of field was big. And so all this stuff I think would be in focus. So I can go in and clean this up even more with these trees up here. Basically, I just want these clouds in the background and maybe the little horizon out here out of focus. Now you can go in, play with this. You can actually create multiple layers of blur depending on, maybe you want part of this image back here to be less blurry than the sky. You can do that. I'll just show you that really quickly. That will improve how this looks even more. So I'm going to add this to a new layer, filter, go to blur, Gaussian blur. Let's just say 5. And then I'm going to again drop this into a new layer mask, select the white, press B to bring up my brush, set the size, and just blur down here. Maybe just right here on this tree in the foreground. And we can, so I just erase some of that image, but to bring it back I can switch this to the white brush and paint on and bring it back, because maybe I want the tree behind my head to be out of focus a little bit. That will make me stand out a little bit. So something like that looks even better than something like this, I would say. So wow, that is a quick composite image tutorial in Photoshop. You can see that it's not perfect. You can see the sun shining on my arms like this, and you can tell that's coming from the background of this original photo. But in this photo, it looks pretty good. We can also do a little bit of burning and dodging. So if we take this levels and call this burn dodge basically increases or decreases the brightness of a specific area. So we can do this burn tool to decrease the light. So say Isabel, the back of her we want to be, actually that would be in the sun. So the front of her would be a little bit darker. The back of me would be a little bit darker. And make sure you have the right layer selected. And then the dodge tool, so the back of her would be a little bit brighter. And the front of me would be a little bit brighter as well. So something like that you can kind of play around with, make it look a little bit more realistic. And there's tons of other things you can do to make this look even better, but I think that's a quick, good overview of what you can do in Photoshop to composite images. So thank you so much again for the question on the course page. If anyone else has any questions about this subject, anything about photography, video, please let me know. I'll try to create a tutorial. And you can also check out videoschoolonline.com for more tutorials and premium courses on all things related to photography, After Effects, motion graphics, video editing, creating your own business, and much, much more. So thanks a lot. Phil Ebner signing out, and have a great day.